Tsavo East, mid-morning. A lioness lies curled in the tall grass just beyond the eastern watering path, one hind leg twisted unnaturally behind her. The snare is steel, looped low, dug deep, rusted at the clasp but sharp where it matters. Her fur is darkened at the haunch, where blood has seeped into the dust. Flies swarm around the wound. She does not move. She only blinks. The call had come an hour earlier. Doughty, a senior field ranger with the East Patrol, had been in the basin nearby checking for snare lines when a local tracker flagged the site. The prints around the trap were fresh, scattered. It hadn't been there long. A few hours, maybe less. That's how fast it happens. A single morning without patrol, and the wire goes down. One animal walks in. Only pain comes out. Doughty kneels at a distance first. He doesn't approach directly. Her eyes are half-lidded but aware. He notes the rapid breath. The blood loss isn't yet fatal. But the damage to the leg is hard to read from here. If it is cut into the joint, she may never walk properly again. If it stays tight another hour, she may not walk at all. The lioness exhales sharply. Not a growl, not a threat. Just air leaving a body in pain. Her tail flicks once, then drops still. Doughty raises the radio slowly and calls the mobile unit. The veterinary team is stationed 15 kilometers out. They'll need 20 minutes minimum. He stays low and waits. A breeze shifts through the acacia behind him. Insects rise, then settle. The grass twitches near her flank, a shallow breath, barely enough to lift the dust. Doughty steps forward. The trap is cruel, but not unusual. Hunters don't aim to kill. They aim to catch, to weaken, to take. Some snares are set for smaller prey. Some, like this, are sized for something far larger. It wasn't an accident. It was meant for her. She tries to lift her head as Doughty nears, but fails. Her body tenses once, then gives in. He whispers low as he circles wide. "Easy, girl. Just easy now." His voice isn't meant to soothe. It's meant to signal. He's not a threat. He's not moving fast. He's not the one who did this. From the side, he sees the damage more clearly. The wire has cut deep above the joint, through skin and some muscle. The leg's mobility will depend on whether the tendon is severed. The good news, it isn't broken. The bad news, flies have already laid eggs along the rim of the wound. He sprays antiseptic mist gently from a small canister, just enough to slow the infection. Her ears twitch. She flinches but doesn't move. That's the line they walk now. Movement could tear the wound further. Stillness could mean her organs begin to shut down. If the team doesn't arrive within the hour, she may lose the leg. If they do, and sedate her correctly, she has a chance. 15 minutes pass. Doughty keeps the sun at his back and shifts slowly from foot to foot, never casting shadow across her face. The lioness blinks once more, then closes her eyes. Still breathing, still alive, but barely. The grass flattens to the west as a low hum builds, the truck approaching. Doughty raises a hand and signals slowly. The sound dips, and the engine cuts long before it reaches them. Two figures descend with packs and a stretcher. "Vitals?" one asks. "Low," Doughty replies. "She's right on the edge." They prepare the tranquilizer quietly. The needle goes in smoothly. Her body doesn't resist. Her breath slows, but it's steady. The vet nods once. The trap is cut free with bolt cutters. The leg slumps, the tension gone. One of the team wraps a saline-soaked bandage just to stop the dust. As they lift her onto the stretcher, Doughty watches the ground. There, near the base of the trap site, faint but present, are two smaller sets of paw prints. Cubs. Recently. Very close. He says nothing yet. Just note the direction they faced. North. The lioness lies still as they load her into the rig. Her chest rises, then falls. The leg is saved. For now. The snare remains, coiled beside the broken grass, already half covered in dust. Doughty remains behind as the vehicle pulls away, the lioness secured and unconscious in the rig. Dust trails settle in its wake, leaving the air still and open again. Around him, the grass bends lightly, and silence returns to the edges of the path. He takes a slow breath, then turns back toward the spot where she had lain. The soil holds more than her body had. Now, without her weight masking the signs, the loose red earth shows the truth beneath. A few meters from the original trap site, Doughty notices something. Not a single print, but a cluster. Small, shallow, uneven. He crouches, shifting aside a brittle stalk. There, pressed lightly into the topsoil, are the unmistakable imprints of cub paws. Not one. At least two, maybe more. They had been here while she was trapped, close enough to touch her. He moves slowly now, following the faint trail that circles to the north, each print just slightly blurred by wind and passing insects. These weren't made hours ago. They were made minutes ago. The outline is too fresh, the pad marks still intact. Whatever left them hadn't fled far. He straightens. Eyes scan the tall grass beyond the water path's edge. Nothing stirs. No rustling. No scent of carrion or predator. But he feels it. The weight of something watching. A gaze, not hostile, not curious, waiting. Back at the trap site, he pauses again. The grass where the lioness had lain is flattened completely, her blood drying dark along the outer ring. But something shifts near the thorn bush just beyond, a sound too soft to be wind. Doughty turns sharply. Then he hears it, a low, guttural sound. Not loud, not sharp, just enough to carry through the stems. The kind of sound that doesn't aim to intimidate. It warns. A growl, deep in the chest. Protective, not dying. The lioness had barely moved while injured, but now, even in sedation, she had made that sound from inside the truck. Her head had lifted just slightly when they rolled past this bend. It hadn't been directed at humans. It was a call, or a response. The cubs are still here. Doughty lowers himself beside the prints again and traces one lightly with his gloved finger. Roughly 3 inches wide, likely less than a year old. He calculates quickly. If she's their mother, and the odds are high, they would have depended on her for hunting, guidance, and protection. Without her, their survival drops sharply. No pride around, no male prints nearby. They've been alone. He radios the field station softly. Suspected cubs near the snare site. 2, possibly 3. Active. No visuals yet. The reply is immediate. Do not pursue. Hold observation. Wait for the team. He stays low. There's no advantage in chasing. If they run, they vanish. If they vanish, they die. Cubs this young can't outlast a week without adult support. They'll either starve or fall to scavengers. That's the risk now. A soft rustle flickers again, this time just at the edge of vision. He turns, nothing, only reeds shifting. But it's close, closer than expected. Then something new appears. Not a body, not a shape. Just 2 golden reflections caught in the filtered light. Eyes. They blink once, then drop below the grass again. The cub had watched him the whole time. Doughty doesn't move. He barely breathes. Slowly, he unhooks a ration pouch from his side and places it on the ground beside him. Not for feeding, just scent. A gesture. Behind him, the wind picks up, lifting dust into the trail. The snare site now looks almost undisturbed, if not for the blood-darkened soil. The cubs haven't left. But they are hiding. If they emerge again, it won't be because of fear. It'll be because they believe she's coming back. The sun leans west. Shadows stretch longer across the reserve. Doughty rises and steps back once, then twice, leaving the prints untouched. He doesn't call out, don't gesture. just watch the tall grass flicker near the thorn bush. Quiet, cautious, and alive. The transport rig had not yet cleared the bend when the first cub stepped from the brush. It was small, ribs showing beneath a dull gold coat, eyes wide and fixed on the path ahead. No sound, no cry, just a slow, trembling step forward into the space where the lioness had been carried minutes earlier. Doughty saw it first from the ridge trail as the team adjusted the restraints in the truck. He raised one hand silently, signaling the others to pause. No one moved. Then a second cub appeared, smaller than the first, ears back, legs hesitant. It moved to stand beside its sibling but didn't touch it. Both stared in the direction of the vehicle, not the men. The dust still floated low where the tires had rolled, leaving a faint track through the grass. The cubs followed it without being called. Not fast, not in panic, just one small step at a time. Doughty remained crouched by the edge of the old snare site. He kept his posture low, unthreatening. The veterinary assistant beside him muttered quietly, "They're following her." Not a question, a fact. The lioness lay sedated in the truck bed, wrapped loosely in canvas and supported by a stretcher sling. The team had cleaned her wound quickly and started fluids before moving her. Her chest still rose and fell, shallow but even. Her cubs had not seen her taken, but somehow they knew where to go. As the vehicle began to roll again, the cubs moved with it. They didn't cry out or approach the rig. They simply kept pace, weaving between brush and low earth, never more than 20 meters behind. Thin tails flicked at flies. Ears stayed forward. Their paws stepped lightly in the soft sand where tires had passed. "They won't last long without her," one of the vets said quietly. "If they stop now, they'll scatter." No one ordered them to intervene. There was nothing to intervene with. The cubs weren't captured. They weren't touched. They were choosing. At the halfway turn near the acacia grove, the truck slowed again to navigate a rocky dip in the road. The cubs paused, panting, then crouched in the shade of a termite mound. Their sides heaved gently with exhaustion, but their eyes never left the truck. When the wheels rolled forward again, they stood and resumed their quiet following. Doughty kept them in view through a rear mirror, watching for signs of collapse or panic. There were none. Just that silent trailing, as if some invisible line stretched between them and their mother, too thin to see, but too strong to break. When the vehicle reached the clinic fence, the gates opened slowly. The truck rolled through. The cubs stopped outside the post line and sat. They did not try to enter. They did not call out. They waited. Inside, the lioness was carried gently into the treatment pen. Saline bags hung from a temporary stand. The vet pressed lightly on her flank, checking muscle tone. She didn't stir. Outside the fence, the cubs moved along the perimeter, not circling, just repositioning. One lay down. The other stood for a long time, blinking against the sun. They had followed their mother all the way to the edge of safety and stopped exactly where the wild ends and the human world begins. Doughty stepped back from the gate. "They're not going anywhere," he said softly. That night, the cubs remained near the clinic wall, curled together beside a low patch of weeds. No cage held them, no leash. They had chosen the line to follow, and now they waited just beyond it. By sunrise, the cubs were still there. Curled beneath the east wall of the clinic fence, pressed close together, their bodies barely rising with breath. The older one lifted its head once at dawn, scanned the yard in silence, then dropped it again on the younger's back. No calls, no sound, just stillness. Inside the pen, the lioness lay in a shallow bed of straw and gauze, her flank rising slowly under the weight of sedation. The drip line hummed softly beside her, carrying fluid into a foreleg that still twitched now and then. The wound on the rear limb had been cleaned, disinfected, and partially stitched, but the swelling hadn't gone down. The vet leaned over her now with a stethoscope, hand pressed lightly on her ribs. "Stable," he said. "Still low blood pressure, but responsive." Dowdy stood just outside the enclosure. He hadn't left the site since the night before. The vet pointed to the leg. "If infection doesn't spread by dusk, we won't have to amputate. But the next 12 hours decide everything." The lioness didn't move. But as the vet stepped away and the light shifted across the floor, her left eye opened. Not fully, not with force, but enough to catch the light. A narrow slit. Focused. Dowdy noticed it first. "She's tracking," he said. The vet returned, lowered his face beside hers, and held a hand in her periphery. The eye followed, sluggishly. But it followed. The sedation was wearing off, not in panic, but in fragments. Small pieces of awareness returning. That meant her system was absorbing the medication properly. That meant her organs were still holding on. Outside, the cubs stirred. The older one stood, approached the fence slowly, and sat with its body facing the door. Its ears were alert now, no longer pinned. The vet watched through the mesh. "They haven't eaten," he said. Dowdy nodded. "Won't until she moves." A bowl of softened meat lay a few feet from the cubs. Untouched since midnight. The younger had sniffed it once, then turned away. Hunger wasn't stronger than instinct. Not yet. By midday, the lioness lifted her head. Just a little. Enough to turn it toward the sound of the wind outside. Her mouth opened faintly. No sound emerged, but the motion was clear. It was the first voluntary movement since she had gone under. Dowdy stepped closer, not into the pen, just to the gate. "You see that?" he asked quietly. The vet already had. "The pain's still high, but she knows where she is." That was the line now. If she stayed alert, if her temperature held, if the leg didn't turn septic, she would keep it. She would walk again. Maybe even hunt. The odds were thin, but real. If they waited, she might live. Near dusk, clouds gathered at the edge of the reserve, casting long shade across the yard. The lioness shifted her body slightly, placing the weight on her uninjured side. The movement was slow, intentional, controlled. And outside the fence, both cubs rose at once, as if something in them registered it. They didn't approach, didn't cry, but they stood and looked through the mesh together, tails down, eyes forward. Inside, the lioness opened her eyes again. This time, both. The gaze was tired, dulled by pain, but it held steady. That night, the team did not sedate her again. They let her rest naturally under observation. No restraints, no light. Only straw and breath, and the low sound of wind passing through the outer grass. The sky was still dark when the lioness stirred. Not with a jolt, not fully, just a slow shift in the straw as her weight rolled off her injured side. The drip line had run dry hours earlier. The vet had removed it to give her rest without restraint. Her breath came shallow but steady, a soft rise in her ribs against the chill of early air. Outside the pen, the cubs were already awake. They hadn't slept through the night. Not deeply. They'd risen and circled once before, curling again near the southern gate. But now, as the lioness moved, both lifted their heads at the same time. The older cub stood first, ears twitching, eyes fixed on the door. Then the younger, slower, still stiff from cold, rose and stepped beside its sibling. Inside, the lioness raised her head fully for the first time. The motion was labored, shoulders trembling with the effort, but she held it upright. Her eyes opened. Not wide, not searching, just enough to catch the faint gray light seeping in from the horizon. She blinked once, then again. And outside the fence, one of the cubs gave a sound. Short, high, unsteady. Not a cry, not a call. A mewl. A sound from deep in the throat, uncertain but purposeful. The kind only the very young make when they aren't sure if the one they love can hear them. The lioness turned her head slowly toward it. Her eyes didn't move quickly, but they moved with intent. She found the sound, found the source, and answered. It was not loud, just one low, rumbling note, barely carried through her throat. Not a growl, not a roar, a recognition. Doughty heard it from his spot beneath the clinic canopy, where he'd stayed with a blanket pulled across his knees. He stood immediately and walked slowly to the pen's side. He didn't speak. He didn't approach the gate. He only watched. The vet emerged seconds later, called by instinct more than alarm. Together they looked through the mesh as the lioness braced her front paws against the straw, pushed, and lifted her body. Not far, not high, just enough to raise her chest off the ground and hold it for 5 long seconds before dropping again. "She's testing weight," the vet murmured. "That's good." Doughty didn't answer. His eyes were on the cubs. The older one was pacing now. Short steps, back and forth, the way the lioness had once done when trapped. The younger cub stayed close to the fence, head tilted, tail twitching faintly in rhythm with her movements. Inside the pen, the lioness laid her head down once more, this time facing the gate. She didn't close her eyes. She didn't sleep. She simply stared. From this distance she could not touch them, but she could hear, she could see. And the cubs knew it. They didn't try to reach through the slats. They didn't climb or press. They just remained close, steady, silent, except for one brief, repeated sound. The mule, the answer. As light crept over the clinic yard, the lioness shifted again. Not to rise, just to settle differently, more evenly. The pain was still there. The leg is still stiff, but her body had memory, and her gaze had found a reason to stay open. By mid-morning, the cubs were lying against the fence once more, their sides touching through the mesh. Inside, the lioness slept again, no longer sedated, no longer slipping. They were still a family, still breathing. Still here. The afternoon heat settled heavy over the clinic yard. The wind had quieted, and the flies moved slower, hanging in the air instead of darting. The lioness remained curled in the pen, her body still but no longer weak. The wound had stopped leaking. The swelling had begun to ease. Her eyes opened more often now, and when they did, they always turned toward the gate. The cubs stayed close as they had every hour before, pressed into the shadow of the wall, paws tucked beneath them, heads occasionally lifting when a sound carried from inside. They still refused food. A bowl of goat meat sat near the fence, picked at only by insects. Hunger tugged at their bellies, but instinct pulled harder. Just after 2, Doughty stepped out from the shade of the main outpost to check the vitals chart. The vet was inside, changing the bandages with slow precision. The lioness didn't resist. She barely moved, except to watch. It was the calmest she had been since arriving. Then a rustle came from the far brush. Doughty turned immediately. One of the cubs was gone. It hadn't made a sound, hadn't run, just vanished. The smaller one remained in place, tail twitching, head low to the ground as if trying to scent the air. But its eyes weren't afraid. They were waiting. Doughty scanned the tall grass. The wind had picked up again slightly, brushing the tops in waves. Minutes passed. No sound, no sign. Then a flash of movement low to the ground. The cub returning. But it wasn't empty-mouthed. Clutched in its jaws was a dried hunk of something old and dark. Not a recent kill. Not fresh. A piece of hide, maybe a rib bone still clinging, long dead and scavenged. Too old to provide anything useful. But the cub dragged it anyway, step by step, tugging with short pulls until it reached the edge of the clinic gate. There, it dropped the piece gently on the ground. Not near the meat bowl. Not where the scent drew it. Right in front of the gate where the lioness had first been carried in. Then it lay down again. Doughty didn't move. He watched as the younger cub walked over, sniffed the old offering, then settled beside it. Neither touched it again. They didn't eat. They didn't fight over it. They just remained still beside it, their eyes on the gate. Inside, the lioness had turned her head. She couldn't see the object directly, but she could hear them, smell the shift in the air. and though she made no sound, her chest lifted slowly with breath, full, then soft again. The vet noticed, too. "What is it?" he asked from behind Dowdy. "A kill," Dowdy said, "but not for eating." The vet stepped closer to the gate, looked down at the dry piece of bone and skin. "You think it's from the same pride?" Dowdy shook his head. "I think it's theirs, or all they had." No one touched the offering. It stayed there in the sun, darkening further as shadows lengthened. It wasn't food. It was a memory, a message, left not for humans, but for the Lioness, proof that they remembered, that they still tried, that even young as they were, they carried something forward. That night the cubs curled beside it again, not for warmth, not for scent, just beside it, and inside the pen the Lioness slept facing the gate, her breathing slow but steady. 7 days passed before the Lioness rose. It happened just after sunrise, when the light was soft and low across the clinic yard. The wound had closed, though it remained tender and swollen. The stitches held. The leg bore weight now, not fully, not without tremble, but enough. She pushed herself up from the straw slowly, pausing halfway to steady her breath. Then, with one long exhale, she stood. Dowdy watched from the shade of the gate post. The vet stood beside him, arms folded, holding the release slip. Neither spoke. Inside the pen, the Lioness didn't pace or test the corners. She only turned once toward the mesh and looked through. Her ears lifted. Outside, the cubs stood. They had risen as soon as she did, as if they'd been waiting for this motion, this signal. One of them stepped forward, just to the edge of the fence, its body thin but steadier than before. The other stood frozen, tail twitching slightly. The vet leaned down and unlatched the lower hook. The gate creaked softly. Not wide, just enough. For a long moment, the Lioness didn't move. Her breath was even now. Her legs shook, but they held. She took one step. Then another. Her injured leg dragged slightly, not from pain, but from unfamiliarity. The muscles had faded. The rhythm had changed. But she walked. When she passed the open gate, neither man flinched. They didn't follow. They didn't speak. The Lioness stepped onto the hard-packed soil and paused. The cubs didn't rush to her. The older one moved first, walking beneath her belly and brushing its shoulder against her side, slow and deliberate. The younger one waited a beat longer, then followed. Nose low, tail brushing the dirt. She leaned slightly into them but didn't stop. Her head was high. Her body was unhurried. Together, they stepped out past the clinic fence. Dowdy exhaled through his nose, arms still crossed. "She's not ready to hunt," he said quietly. "She won't need to, not yet," the vet replied. "Water's nearby, and she'll hide better now that she walks." They both knew the risks. She couldn't outrun the threat. She couldn't defend if pressed. If another predator crossed her path, especially a male lion, she'd be at a disadvantage. But she was wild, and the wild doesn't pause for healing. It waits for nothing. The Lioness moved toward the brush at the eastern rise. Not fast, but forward. The cubs flanked her without instruction. The older stayed tight at her hip, the younger just behind. Their tracks in the dirt, 3 separate lines weaving once then straightening, marked the path they took. Dowdy watched them until they vanished into the tall grass. The old piece of kill the cub had brought still lay near the pen gate, sun-bleached now and mostly dried. No one picked it up. No one removed it. It remained there, quiet, where their wait had ended, and where her walk had begun. 3 days after her release, the tracking team followed the prints east, past the basin trails and into the scrub near the old watering path. The rains hadn't come yet, so the ground still held shape, impressions clear against the dry topsoil, each paw outlined in fine dust. Dowdy walked in front, head low, eyes scanning the earth with slow precision. Behind him, Two rangers stepped carefully, silent except for the crunch of gravel under the boot. They had expected signs of struggle, of collapse, or perhaps nothing at all. But what they found was different. The prints were fresh, less than a day old. 3 sets, 1 large, 2 small. They ran parallel for over 100 meters, curving near a shaded slope and turning again where the brush thinned. The stride was slow but steady. No drag marks, no stumbles. Doughty knelt beside a flat patch where the prints had paused. The lioness had stopped here, the full weight of her body pressed into the ground. He could see the deeper indent of the injured leg, slightly offset, bearing some of her weight now. One cub's print overlapped hers, not by accident, not by mistake. It had stepped into her path, pressed close, then moved on. They followed the trail further until it reached the site of the original trap. The snare had been removed, but the disturbed soil still marked the place. Around it, the ground bore more prints, smaller, clustered. The cubs had returned here after she was taken. Likely the same evening, possibly within the hour. Doughty stood quietly at the edge of the trap site. No grass grew where the wire had coiled. A faint trace of blood remained in the earth, dark and cracked now. But around that spot the soil told the rest of the story. The cubs had circled it, waited near it, slept against it. One set of prints dug in, deeper than the others. Pacing, maybe. Restless. They didn't run, one ranger said softly. They stayed. Doughty nodded. That was what changed everything. In most cases, cubs scatter when a mother falls. Instinct forces distance, a wild kind of grief that makes them vanish. But these two had waited, had remained long enough to be found, had followed her, not out of training, but memory. The wind moved across the clearing. A dry swirl lifted dust where her body had once been bound. Now the marks of return circled it, not chaotic, not desperate, just a present. Then, beyond the trap site, the prints began again, all 3 facing east toward the edge of the park. Doughty followed them with his eyes. No blood, no stagger. Just a line of prints widening slightly as the terrain opened. "She's moving better," the second ranger said. "She's choosing the open paths," Doughty replied. "That means she's thinking ahead." They didn't track beyond the rise. There was no need. The signs had already given the answer. The lioness hadn't come back to the trap site by accident. She'd passed through it deliberately. The cubs had joined her, and together they had moved on. Doughty knelt one last time and brushed his hand lightly over the final set of prints. Then stood. The sun angled low behind the trees. Long shadows stretched over the trail. The dust shifted once, then settled. And just like that, they were gone. Not in fear, not in pain, but forward,